Lesson 1.5, Nutrients and the Calorie, What Food's in Your Food, Part 2. The goals of this lesson are to give students an overview of the basic structure and food source of nutrients, and to differentiate between the larger polymer and smaller monomer version of each macronutrient. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to describe the properties of the nutrients in foods, fiber, protein, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals. Explain that macronutrients are polymers that can be broken into monomers, and identify common micronutrients. We'll achieve these goals by having a lecture and a Socratic discussion. To prepare for this lesson, you will need to review the key scientific concepts that will be presented throughout the lesson. They include the basic structure and function of the macronutrients, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, the difference between cholesterol and other lipids, the functions of vitamins A, B, C, D, E, and K, and the function of common minerals, iron, calcium, sodium, and potassium. You can review the scientific content in the background reading provided for you in the teacher primer, the teacher manual, and the student workbook. The teacher primer provides in-depth knowledge about the scientific content presented in this lesson. The teacher manual, or lesson plan, provides a minute-by-minute explanation of the lesson structure, including instructions on how to manage the discussion and activity. The student workbook provides additional explanations for students. You will need to print the discussion worksheet for the students as well as the homework worksheet. The key point of this lesson's do now is that there are two major classifications of nutrients, macronutrients and micronutrients. We'll get there by having a short discussion. You will ask students to recall what each type of nutrient is and what they are used for in the body. This do now is intended to gauge your students' current memory of what they know about the nutrients in food. You may decide to spend more or less time on this lesson based on what your students already know. The key points of this lesson's discussion are that each of the macronutrients has a larger polymer and a smaller monomer version. The monomer version is typically easier absorbed and digested than the polymer version. Dietary sources and functions of the macronutrients, and dietary sources and functions of the micronutrients. We'll get there by having students participate in a Socratic discussion and fill out a worksheet as they go through a lecture. Caution, this lecture may take more than one day to complete in your class, depending on your students' current knowledge. The discussion first goes over three macronutrients: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. The discussion then focuses on the micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, giving an overview of their primary functions. Students will keep track of the key points from the discussion using the worksheet. These key points are food sources of the macronutrients, the monomer and polymer forms for each of the macronutrients, that monomer versions of carbohydrates, which are simple sugars, are more quickly absorbed into the blood than the polymer version, which is starches, the differences and similarities in structure between triglycerides, fatty acids, and cholesterol, why lipids require special transporters in the blood, while carbohydrates and proteins can float freely, the function of proteins and amino acids in the body, commonalities between the water-soluble vitamins, and commonalities between the fat-soluble vitamins. You can review the answers and descriptions of the key points using the worksheet answer key. It has everything organized just as your students will be seeing it. The teacher primer and the teacher manual review the key scientific concepts. Additionally, the teacher manual is useful for providing talking points to guide the Socratic discussion with your students. The key points of this lesson's wrap-up are that each of the three macronutrients have a larger polymer form and a smaller monomer form, and that vitamins and minerals are found not only naturally in food, but are used as food additives and are found in supplemental forms. We'll get there by having a Socratic discussion with the students. The main idea of the wrap-up is to give students a chance to summarize the content they have learned in this lesson. Students will write down their answers to questions posed in the wrap-up on their worksheet. These questions can be answered together in class or assigned as homework. The key point of this lesson's homework is to gather information about your students' baseline knowledge of digestion and absorption. We'll get there by having students fill out a worksheet. Using the homework worksheet, students should fill out a table that summarizes what nutrients are digested and absorbed in each organ of the digestive tract. This homework is intended to be used as a formative assessment. Therefore, you should collect this homework at least a day before you plan on teaching Lesson 2.1. This will give you enough time to determine how much in-class time you need to spend on digestion and absorption. If your students have never learned about digestion and absorption, you can instead use this worksheet to summarize the content they will learn in Lesson 2.1. There is a lot of content covered in this lesson, but it is content that most students and teachers have covered in a Biology 1 course. If you have not taught this content before, be sure to give yourself enough time to read the teacher primer to thoroughly understand the science. A major misconception and point of confusion, even for adults, addressed in this lesson is that of cholesterol. We often hear about good and bad cholesterol, also called HDL and LDL cholesterol, but what does this mean? This is referring to fat transporters, which are made up of cholesterol as well as phospholipids. HDL and LDL simply carry around the hydrophobic fat in the blood. There is no good and bad cholesterol molecule, just good and bad cholesterol transporters, which happen to transport other types of lipids in the blood as well. You can learn more about the different types of lipids in the teacher primer. Students may ask how much of each type of nutrient they need to eat. There are recommended dietary allowances, or RDAs, set for some, but not all of these nutrients. These are recommended by nutrition scientists and established by the government. You can read about those RDAs and discover what the difference is between an RDA, an adequate intake, and a tolerable upper intake level in the teacher primer. Students will also get a chance to see their nutrition needs when they complete the Lesson 1.6 homework. Because this is a long lesson, some teachers spend multiple days on it and incorporate a food lab demonstration. This demonstration, called the McMush Lab, is found in an Alternative Approaches folder on the website. In the demonstration, you will grind up a food, a burger works well, and test for macronutrients. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to describe the properties of the nutrients in food, explain that macronutrients are polymers that can be broken into monomers, and identify some common micronutrients. It is important that students are familiar with the different forms of the macronutrients, as this concept is used throughout the remaining lessons in the Metabolic Diseases module. We will discuss digestion of macronutrients in Lesson 2.1 and metabolism of macronutrients throughout Unit 2. Don't forget that if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, to let us know. You can contact any of the CTSE team members and we will be happy to help.